Welcome back. Thank you for joining. Aliza, thank you for coming on and being my guest today.
Thank you. I look forward to chatting about solar with you.
Yeah. So like most episodes I do, the topic comes from either an uneducated standpoint that I have and me trying to learn about it myself, or because I get questions about this topic with my clients. And in the case of this topic, going solar in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, it's both. For a little context for listeners or viewers, I live in a condo. It's a 8-unit condo building. And we have a large flat roof, which we might get into a little bit later. But we got a lot of sun. And so I always knew that when I bought a single family home that I would end up getting solar. There's no question about it. I mean, assuming it makes sense for my house and all of that, but it was something I definitely would research. And with a condo, I never really even considered it, but due to the fact that we get so much light here, I was like, this is so silly for us to not harness this. So I went onto the DC Department of Energy and Environment's website, and that's where I found your company, EnergySage, which basically was an awesome source of education. We'll get into it a little bit, but it also obviously gives you your options and tells you kind of what you can and cannot do. So I just want to thank you for coming on and hopefully guiding me a little bit more, and definitely anybody who's watching or listening, so that they know kind of where to go if they want to look into getting solar.
Looking forward to it. It's my favorite topic to talk about.
Yeah. So, it goes without saying, I think a lot of people understand most of the inherent benefits at this point. I mean, we've been talking about solar and renewable and different energies for decades and decades now. And actually, interestingly, I learned on your website that solar panels were put on the White House in 1979 with President Carter, and then Reagan took them off the year after that, I think, after he was in the White House. So, I mean, obviously I've heard about this kind of stuff since, I was born in 81. There's no surprises here on the show. So, I've been hearing about this stuff since I was a kid. But I don't think I realized that it actually happened before I was born on the White House, which I thought was really cool. But anyway, let's talk about some just general, why would you go solar? So we can ping pong this back and forth a little bit, so I don't know, maybe you want to start with why you think people should even consider it.
For sure. Yeah. So there's a couple reasons. There's absolutely the environmental component. It's probably the easiest and fastest way someone can reduce their CO2 emissions and have a net zero home. And then there's definitely the economic component to it. It is cheaper than fossil fuels. There's no doubt about that at this point in time, and it's only getting less expensive. And so I think it's really just right now, people just don't understand how solar works and how it relates to their utility, relates to their utility bill. But at the end of the day, I have a lot of people say, once they realize what the savings are, they're like, why doesn't everybody go solar? I'm like, that's a great question. And it really has to do with education and understanding.
Yeah, for sure. Education and understanding. And I think it's one of those blanket things you understand, yes, I want to save the environment, or yes, I want to spend less money, or yes, I want to help create more jobs in a new sector. I think people get that. But when you really start to dig into the meat and potatoes of how it works, it can get a little bit confusing. We're going to talk about, so one of the kind of financial benefits are solar renewable energy certificates, or SRECs. Mm-hmm. And the first time I ever heard about them, I was like, what? It's not that actually the way you explained it was right before our call was the easiest way I've been explained before. What did you tell me? How is it the best way to view them?
I'd view it like a solar stock market. So it fluctuates, right, and you sell them. So you sell, we call this a production incentive. So it's based on the performance of the system. And so for every 1 megawatt hour or 1,000 kilowatt hours, which is how, we determine the electricity being produced, you get one SREC. And so right now in DC, they're getting sold for around $390 per SREC. And that is and you can sell them for years. So like over a decade, you can get money, passive income coming in. Maryland also has SRECs. I think they're about $75 per rec. So, there's absolutely like a passive income and economic component to that incentive. And then all 3 states also have net metering, which I can dig into now, or we can also chat about a little bit later. But that's really how you can eliminate your electric bill by going solar, is through that.
Yeah, I mean, why don't we go into it? Why don't you explain that to people, and then we'll kind of back out a little bit. And we're going to go in and out. This is free flowing conversation, and of course, people should know by listening to this that if they've got extra questions, and I'm sure they will, then they can reach out to us afterwards. So if we don't cover something, it's not the end of the world.
Totally. So net metering, which is in all 3 states, that's really what I would say like revolutionized solar and why so many people have begun to adopt solar is net metering programs. Most states that have solar as a viable option have net metering. And essentially how it works is that think of it like you are kind of getting store credit from the utility. So you are producing electricity on your roof. The utility is tracking and storing that electricity on the grid, and then giving it back to you at another time. So they're kind of like moving energy around when you need it, and that's how you can theoretically eliminate your electric bill against the utility. So we call it all 3 states have one-to-one net metering, or most of the utilities in all 3 states have one-to-one net metering. So 1 kilowatt hour produced equals 1 kilowatt hour consumed, and so they cancel each other out essentially.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, so you and I are probably at various times going to say DC, Maryland, and Virginia, or DC, Maryland, or Virginia. So, I just want to go on record as saying it's not completely the same in all 3 jurisdictions, but I'm licensed in all 3 jurisdictions. I've got clients in all 3 jurisdictions. And so I wanted to make sure that this episode spoke at least in part to anybody in any market. And we also deal with renters, buyers, and sellers. And so we're going to get to that in a minute as well. But there is just a lot of information to cover. And, it's important that you're paying attention to where you live as far as when you're looking up the incentives. And, you just mentioned something that's available for all. And obviously federal tax incentives are available for all 3 states as well. But, there are specific things that if we have time, we can get into where each state just has different incentives. So know as you're listening that, it may be slightly different for you in Maryland if we're talking about something in DC or Virginia. But I mean, something that is common between all 3 is all of them have very public goals for when they want to get to 100% clean electricity by. And DC is 2050 along with Virginia, and Maryland actually is by 2040. And so, to get to that, obviously, this education component is first and foremost where we've got to go. But I mean, you also need to start offering these incentives to people because, money talks. I mean, honestly, if we're just being honest about it.
Definitely does.
Yeah. So you've got to make it, I mean, to my point earlier about how you have to research this and understand it, especially in this market and, lots of markets, maybe we can say everywhere in the US, but time is money and people don't have an infinite amount of time. So if you're going to sit down and really understand what your options are, you have to, make it, maybe someone's motivated completely just by the environment. And if they are, I think that's actually really awesome. But a lot of people will be extra motivated if there's financial incentives as well.
For sure. Yes. There's always that subset of people that doesn't matter how much it costs, they will go solar and do that. But I would say most people, it has to do both, help the environment and also like be beneficial to their pocketbook.
Yep. Okay. So let's really get into the meat and potatoes of this. So let's say that, we'll do the easier one first. I'm a renter and I want to use solar. What options do I have, if any?
Yeah. Great question. The options are pretty limited in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. Currently, there isn't widespread community solar in those places, and that's really your option is a community solar, which basically what that means is that you are getting your energy from a third-party provider through like a solar farm or something like that, and you potentially could get a discount on your electric bill. Definitely becoming more popular across the country. There's just a lot of regulatory things around it, which is why it's not as popular at the moment compared to rooftop solar.
Yeah, but I wanted to mention it because I also saw that on your website about
Mm-hmm.
community solar. And while it's not huge in this area yet, the assumption and hope, of course, is this is coming down the pike for the area. And so
Yeah.
renters shouldn't be dissuaded from keeping up on what their options are. Like, who knows if I had researched this when I was a renter, if I could have had some option or not. But I mean, I didn't even think to to look
Right.
into it because I didn't know that it was even an option anywhere. I always just saw the houses that put them on their single family homes, and they, and that was kind of it for me. So I wanted to mention it so people could, maybe they keep an eye on it and they try to research it, every so often to see if there've been any changes so that they can also deal with that too,
Totally.
and they can have it too.
Absolutely. I mean, the solar industry and just like renewable space is constantly changing and evolving. I mean, obviously, I find it super interesting. There's always something new, like every day it seems. So keep tabs on what's going on, and I could imagine the next couple of years that there will be some community solar in these 3 states.
You can't put these initiatives out. You can't put these goals out as a,
Right.
and not come up with solutions, right? So, maybe you're not checking the website every day, but if there's things like, I talk to people a lot about seasonal things they need to do for their homes,
Mm.
right? So you clean the gutters after the leaves fall in the fall, and you turn your, water off when it's going to freeze, things like that. Maybe once a year when you're evaluating your energy and your electric bills and stuff like that, that's when you look into it. So, keep an eye on it.
For
Okay.
sure.
So renter, that's our option there. So if you are an owner, take me through the process. What do we do?
Yeah, for sure. So there's definitely options for someone who's a homeowner. So first off, you go to a place like EnergySage, kind of determine, is your house appropriate for solar is really step one. Like, can this property go solar at all? And there's a couple criteria to look at. Solar access is one, which really just means like, does the sun hit your roof? Or if you have a large yard, you could potentially do like a ground mounted system. Like, do you have a big enough space to install a ground system? So sun is the one, can't go solar without sunshine. Roof age is definitely two. Those are probably the top two things that someone has to seriously consider. You know, when a roof is like midlife, which could mean a lot of things too. So when someone tells me my roof is 15 years old, that could be near the end, or that could, if it's like an architectural shingle that's like rated for 40, 50 years, I mean, that's like, barely a scratch on that roof. So really understanding
Mhm.
what roof material you have and how old it is will really be a determination on whether you can go solar. Now, do you want to roll a re-roof into the solar project? That's an option. A lot of installers are
What does
roofers as
that mean?
well.
What?
Um,
Oh, I see. So
yeah,
you can get a new roof at the same time so that,
totally.
okay, let's back up.
Sure.
Let's say the roof is old. Let's say the roof is old and you want solar and you don't replace your roof, but you get the solar. The
hmm
issue, I'm assuming, is that you've got to pull all those panels off to
Yep.
do the roof and then put them back on. And that's probably a charge. You're probably someone's charging
Something.
you to do that work.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the issue. So you're thinking about the cost benefit analysis of potentially having to pull all those panels off
Right.
to redo your roof at some point and then put that back on. Okay. Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
So you were saying that you can.
yeah, so when I talk to people about the age of their roof, I think it's what type of roof. So like I'll say asphalt shingle is the most common roof and like most straightforward installation. So standard asphalt shingle roof. You can put solar on flat roofs as well. So that would be like gravel, rubber. There's different kind of racking apparatuses you can do there. Metal roofs, really a standing seam metal roof is the most recommended. You could potentially use another, go solar with other metal roofs, but it's expensive and complicated. And then like shake roofs, no, I mean, essentially impossible to go solar, or like those metal shingles, also really, really, really difficult. So, um, that'll be like green light or red light, honestly, is like roof material on whether you can do it or
Mm-hmm.
not. And then like if your roof is on like not quite done, but on like the latter kind of half, how I talk to people is like, this is an inevitable cost. Like you're gonna, if they tell me they're gonna live in this house for a while and the roof will have to be replaced, and you will have to replace it in the next 5 years, why not do it now to then be able to take advantage of solar, because you're going to have to do it anyway. But you can talk to installers and ask them what would be the cost of removing and replacing. So that is an option. Installers do it all the time, but just has to be like an open dialogue with that contractor.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Um, yeah, sorry, the flat roof thing is something I'm thinking about the most
Sure.
because I don't know if I want to admit this, but I've dealt with more flat roof leaks than I would care to admit. And so it's just a thing to work around also. Like literally they have to probably work around where the panels are.
Yep.
And access and things like that. So I mean, I wish no buildings had flat roofs, honestly, but here we are.
Yeah. All these installers. So, another thing obviously you want to consider is like, is this installer reputable, right? So like, do they have the appropriate insurance and certification, years of experience, um, you know, good quality equipment, ratings and reviews, all that type of stuff. So
Mhm.
a reputable contractor will have good quality warranties affiliated with them. So they would have a labor warranty, a workmanship warranty. The roof would be, part of that. Kind of quick stat, solar, I think it's like less than 1% at this point that solar causes roof leaks. So it's very infrequent that a solar system would actually cause a roof leak. And then on like the flat roofs, there are a couple ways to install them. You can do like a ballasted system, so you're just like weighting it down, so you're not penetrating the roof at all. Sometimes they can do brackets that are essentially like latch to the side of the roof. So there's a
Mhm.
couple like non-penetrative options for flat roofs depending on the material.
Nice. Okay. Well, again, I know nothing about this stuff, so it sounds like you've thought it through. Okay, so we have determined if you're a good fit. Um, we kind of stepped a little bit of a step in saying how you choose your installer, and making sure that they're reputable. But another thing you would do obviously is gathering and comparing quotes, because
Totally.
there are so many different options. And we'll get into cost and financing and stuff like that. But you really do want to find the right system for your home, and you want to make sure that you're taking advantage of everything that is available to you and your specific home. So, not that this episode is here to tout your website like exclusively, but EnergySage, no, it was one where it made it very easy for me to understand kind of what we could do just by plugging in some information. So whether or not you use that or whatever else, I think comparing is important, and not just jumping at the first thing that you research or the first place that you find.
Yeah, I can agree. I mean, just like anything else you buy, I mean, who doesn't comparison shop at this point in time for anything? So like when you buy a dishwasher, I mean, it took me weeks to buy a dishwasher, like doing all the research and figuring out like what was the best one. And same for solar. I mean, it's a one-time purchase for most people. This kind of comes back to why most people don't have solar, is because most people have never bought solar. I mean, people buy cars, people understand how to buying homes kind of works in general, or they assume, I'm going to buy a house. And solar is like a big ticket item that just really little information on, or most people just don't have any experience about. But EnergySage is one way where someone can easily comparison shop online, like you could with anything else, like on Amazon or whatnot. Which is why our CEO created the website to begin with, was to do just that.
Yeah. No, I mean, It's an important point because we'll get to cost later, but it's not like just a couple $1,000s to get solar.
Right.
So you comparison shop for a dishwasher, you said, which is maybe like at the most $1,000.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you can get more expensive ones, but you know what I'm saying? Like
Sure.
it's an appliance. It's not affixed to your roof. It's not, it can pull it out and put another one in if you really hated it.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I think that that's definitely key, is that you're researching your options and feeling, solid in your purchase before that, because
Definitely.
it's not like you're going to pull them right off and just replace it or do something else, so do your research for sure. Okay. So let's not belabor that. So then you're going to choose your installer and you're going to choose what you want to use and how you want to use it. You decide if you wanted to fix your roof or not, and all of those fun things. Then you've got to decide how to pay for it. So
Yep.
Take us through a little bit of that.
Yeah. So, the cost of a solar system, can range wildly. So like, you can have a really small system that would be, could 14, 15K to, massive systems. Like if your electric bill is like $500 a month, which people have, if it's all electric, you could be looking at, 50, 60, 70 panel systems, which could be, 50, 60, $70,000, $70,000. So,
Yeah.
It's all depends on the size that you're looking at. But, I think what people don't realize is like when you install solar, that's going to be producing energy for at minimum 25 years, if not 30, 40 years. So, what you're really buying is all of your electricity for, 4 decades. Versus,
Right.
paying the utility for 4 decades. And that's like really like how I like to think about it, is like kind of turning how we paid electricity in the past on its head. So it's basically upfront versus, parsed out over time. But you can finance, so that's an option. So instead of you can pay cash, right? So like upfront, you paid for our electricity forever, essentially. Never have to think about it again. Eliminate your electric bill. You can finance, and I would say like in most places, most of the time, the financing will be lower than what you're paying the utility. So if you're paying like $200 a month on utility, on electricity every month, you could set up financing that's $150 a month. So you're net positive $50 a month. I would say most people finance. I had a colleague that said, majority of people don't have like, $20,000 just like burning a hole in their pocket. So, you finance this type of thing. Most solar financing you can get through an installer. So they have their own financing options. You can obviously go through your credit union if you want. You could do like a HELOC or a HELoan if that is better for you. It really depends. There's a lot of options for financing. But at the end of the day, it will majority of the time be like net positive immediately. And then I would say the third option would be a lease or PPA, where you don't own the system yourself. You're essentially renting the equipment and the power being produced. And I honestly don't really recommend that unless you don't have the tax liability status to take advantage of the federal tax credit, which we probably should talk about that at least a little bit. So, the ITC, or the investment tax credit, is the federal incentive so every state has this as an option when you go solar, and it's a tax credit, and currently it's 26%. It's 26% next year as well. And very often, if you take out a loan through the installer, you will essentially reinvest that tax credit back into the loan. It's really what spurred solar nationwide, is that federal tax credit. It's like huge. It's really what got it really helped create jobs. It helped start a lot of companies. It helped people get on board to go solar. And it's like totally like integrated into like the economics for both like cash and financing for solar.
Yeah, I mean, I guess a question I have, and I don't want to speak beyond kind of what but one of the questions I'm thinking of is, this whole area is a very transient So,
Hmm.
what if someone's not staying in their home for longer than 5 years and they've purchased the home in and they're financing it?
Mm.
Because I mean, in cash, then you would just sell the house and say, we have a solar system. I'm assuming it would just transfer just
Yeah.
to the new owner of the house because the panels are there. And so you could say it was X amount of value, and you can tack that onto the sales price of the home.
Hmm.
But if you don't outright own it, can you transfer the payments, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get it a lot. So what I recommend, well, one, talk to the installer always. If you're going to get financing through them, you just want to ask, is this loan transferable? Is that an option for me?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I honestly recommend paying down the loan before you sell. When I bought my house, but you know better than I, buying a house can be really complicated. And things can hold up the deal, all of that, and just for ease of sale, if you have it as available, pay down the loan and then roll it into the resale value of the house, is usually what I recommend. Um, at least the stat that I know of, from Zillow, which is a huge report on solar and real estate, is about a 3 to 4% resale value increase if you have a house with solar. I think it depends, where you live and demographics and that type of thing, but I'd say in most places a net positive for the house when you sell with solar on it, as long as it's a purchase and not a lease or PPA. So if you lease, there's no increase to this resale value of the house.
Yeah, I should look up some stats about just DC and the resale value with solar here because, I mean, also just getting things done in a city versus
Mm.
in, where there's more like literal like street real estate where like people can come in and do what they need to do and all of that. Excuse me. I think it's just harder to even access roofs when in half of these buildings and stuff here. So
Yeah.
I would say that I would assume that that it's even more value here, right? And just I mean, listen, most
Oh,
of my
for
clients
sure.
have like no time to do anything, and so like the last thing I want to do is orchestrate this. So the question is like, what is the cost of all the research and all the planning and all of that that's gone into it as well, right?
Definitely. I mean, DC specifically, which I touched on a little bit, no matter how short you're going to be in the house, like, man, I wish I lived in DC just so I could get the solar incentives. They really are the best in the country. And I tell people that all the time. Like, you will get more money back through DC than what you paid for the system in a pretty short period of time. So the return on investment in DC is like 3 years or something for solar. So that means let's say you put down 20,000, you will recoup that 20K in like 3 years, and then that's just icing from there for 30 more
Yeah.
years.
Wow.
So
Well,
that
that's
in
good
and
to
of
know.
itself will help sell the house, I think.
I mean, that's great to know. And that's a great note for us to end on is just that DC has some of the best. And I mean, Maryland and Virginia, I mean, it's good everywhere. So you don't want to
For
be
sure.
like, hey, everywhere else sucks and DC is the best. But I mean, I live in DC, but anyway.
Every
No,
place is
but
good. DC is the best, though.
yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good to know. And so, if anybody is interested in going down this route and figuring things out, I'm definitely going to make sure that we write down your website on the show notes so that people can check things out for
Great.
themselves. I'm happy to, send people your way as well. And of course, people can come at me with questions, though I'm not sure I'm the best person to answer them yet. But I'm doing my research like everybody else is to make sure I get it. So, Aliza, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alison, for inviting me here to chat about solar.